40 years ago, I picked up one of these and I was fascinated. And it's been my life. Really, the camera has been my life since then. It's a 16mm Bollocks Camera. It's clockwork, so can you hear that? And if you need to wind it, you don't need a battery, you just wind it. And then it'll go again. This is a magic box. When I started, it was a magic box of light. So, light catching. And light is our challenge. Sometimes it's a problem, sometimes it's an asset. It's like what we have heard about taking an energy and turning it around and using it. That's what I can do with this. Now, in this case, I've got a bit of glare here from this light, so I'm going to put a hat on so I can see you. So I've been a cinematographer since the mid-70s, and my role has always been here, behind the camera. But as time went on, I realised the job of telling a story, the one I was seeing with the camera, was not always being done very well. And there's often a big difference between what we're seeing, I mean I can see all of you, and what we're looking at. Too often this is the case in journalism. In visual communication classes, I tell my students, I try to teach them to see rather than to just look. It's a very different process. When you see something worth sharing and no one's talking about it, perhaps it's time to step in front of the camera and tell the story yourself. This happened to me a couple of times before I realised, or really knew, that I needed to hybridise my practice, to slightly change my practice. And this influenced my PhD research, my current PhD research, which I began to consider in 2009. And I started to focus on the conflict of international whaling, really. Japan's whaling, but it was central to the conflict, an international conflict. The first time that I realised I should step in front was on the Transmara in Africa. And I was standing there in Kenya in 2006 on the top of a cliff 1,000 feet above the plain. And I was looking at a massive black shape. I thought it was trees. But as I zoomed in with the camera, I realised that the trees were moving. The black shape wasn't trees. It was tens of thousands of wildebeest. And you know, I was alone in nature with the camera, and I had to tell this. I had to translate this experience I just had. I found the experience, of seeing this moving shape, this moving mass of life, incredibly moving myself. And I had to tell the story. The second time this really hit me was in 2011 in Tohoku. We went with students from Wakayama Dai to volunteer to help people affected by the tsunami, the earthquake and tsunami. And after all the television and media coverage, nothing can compare you for actually being there. And you kind of, for the first time, you start to process what happened. As we descended into the tsunami zone, you go from a certain level above sea level down into the tsunami zone, the affected area. We parked at a roadside parking stop, and I took myself aside with the camera. I put it on a table, and with spontaneity and intensity, I sat there and spoke to the camera. That was the best way I could think of to relay and relate what I was experiencing at that moment. In 2008, after shooting Whale Wars 1 for Animal Planet, I really discovered for the first time the whaling issue. And for 5 weeks in Antarctica, I saw for myself what was going on around this, the central activity at that time of international whaling. On one hand, I was delighted to receive an Emmy nomination for the work we were doing, for the cinematography. But on the other hand, I was not comfortable with the way Animal Planet was telling this story. This was the highest rating, most profitable television that they'd ever made to that point. And it turned Sea Shepherd, who were the subject of the documentary series, was Sea Shepherd Conservation Society, it turned them into a multi-million-dollar operation, and it has been ever since, every year since then. I believe Animal Planet and Sea Shepherd became intoxicated with the success and the ratings and the profits. Animal Planet was criticised for selling out on the animals. They used to do just stories and issues on animals. But at that point, I believe they became political. And they got criticised. I didn't at the time, but I happily concur with the criticism that took place at that time. And I know you, the viewers out there, didn't get the full story. It was one-sided, and I began to realise as the experience went on that truth was actually better than the story you were getting. The true story is actually better. And by the way, the melting ice was really the big problem. The whales were not the problem. Killing a few whales, a few hundred whales, okay, that's maybe a problem to some people, but in our broader context, what I was seeing down there, pieces of ice floating past, looked like Mount Everest, to me that was very unsettling. I want to share an example of how the truth is better than the fiction. And this goes to the heart of what Sea Shepherd and Animal Planet are complicit in. This actually happened, and they didn't want you to know about this. In Whale Wars 1, 2 activists jumped on the Yushin Maru ship, the Japanese hunting ship. An Englishman and an Australian called Ben Potts. And a transaction took place between 2 very impressive young guys. 2 guys, both 28, both passionate about what they do. And Ben from Sea Shepherd and Suda Kenji from Kyoto Senpaku had an interaction. And I've interviewed them both since then to explain and share the Japanese respect for nature. Kenji-san offered Ben-san a VHS copy of Miyazaki Hayao's Princess Mononoke Hime. And he thought this was the best thing he could do at the time. The Japanese crewman, the whale murderer in the story, said, "I think you might like this." And sure enough, later, the eco-terrorist in the story agreed. He did like it. Ben told me about this on camera, and when he was returned from the Yushin Maru back to the Sea Shepherd ship by the Australian government customs vessel, the Oceanic Viking. And he was brought back to our ship, and that's when we had a chance to talk about this. So this is where I find myself not using the camera, not now, and not in Taiji. And some of you may know about the Cove documentary, which came in 2009, a year after we started this little journey. Instead, I'm writing about this process, which I call an alternative activism. And let's just look at where we are now, and with the whaling issue, where we could go and why. People don't really know much detail in Japan and outside Japan about this issue. Why bother with this tradition thing? Because I believe, and I think I can present to you the supporting evidence, that this is the greatest sustainability story in Japan never fully explained. We know about Edo's sustainability principles, perhaps, some of us, but we know little of this. As communities, both here in Japan and in the West, we know little of how excuse me, Tokugawa rules applied to whaling. History tells us how in 1670 net whaling was invented in Taiji. And along with that developed the first complex system of manufacture in Japan. I think that's pretty special. I argue that this was the only sustainable industrial whaling anywhere in the world. Industrial whaling. And it was interrupted by Western greed and wastefulness in the 1820s when the British, the Americans, the Australians came to the Japan grounds, the area around Japan, and started taking whales. No permission was sought from Japan because Japan was a closed country, and 20 years of intense whaling followed. Places like Taiji depended on the whales. In 1851, the black ships arrive. Perry basically holds a gun to Japan's head, the biggest floating armada of firepower ever taken from one country to another at the time. And he says, open up. We want to do business. He was under pressure to open Japan for oil. Whale oil. Okay? Gasoline hadn't been invented. So whale oil and gold was driving this. That's another story. It sounds familiar, doesn't it? That oil and gold. It's what drives the economy right now. But that's another story. I say Sea Shepherd is the second coming of the black ships. This time, the same countries want to close the whaling down. It's the same people, same group. And this time, they hold a media gun to Japan's head and they demand it to stop. Sea Shepherd, and sadly leaders like Caroline Kennedy, dismiss tradition in Taiji and reject the tradition of dolphin drive hunting. It's a tradition. Obviously, they've never been to Noto or here, this place, even to Himi. Karatsu in Kyushu. It's a dolphin drive hunt, and this work is dated 1773. In my mind, that qualifies as tradition. Dolphin hunting and whale hunting has a rich history in Kihanto, as well as in other parts of Japan. Taiji was and still is the perfect place to catch whales and dolphins. And really, it's said that this started in the 1980s. It didn't start in the 1980s. It's clear. It's been going on for a long time. It's been going on since Jomon times. And as we know, if you visit Noto Hanto, you'll see the evidence. The key piece of equipment is the whale hunting boat. This is the Sekabune, and arguably the fastest human-powered wooden boat in the world. Who's ever seen one of these? Nobody. This is very typical. I've asked heaps of people this question, and they've all responded the same way. This is not unremarkable to me, but it's crazy. You guys need to know about this. So much of this history has never been explained in the context of where we find ourselves today. To understand this is to understand cultural difference. Not what Australian Prime Minister Malcolm Turnbull described on the 18th of December, this past December, when he came to meet Abe-san. He said, on this issue, we have a difference of opinion. It's not a difference of opinion, Mr. Turnbull. It's a difference of culture. And for that reason, it should be respected. Now, he can say he respects the difference of opinion, but, we're talking about something quite different to opinion here, and much deeper. For that reason, I'm calling for Taiji and its history to be respected as significant industrial heritage under the UNESCO World Heritage Convention. Something else Australia and the US don't understand. In the relatively short few hundred years of our history, we don't know what it is to be hungry. We've never been truly hungry. Japan, this country, has known that more than once. Story is everything. Story, truth and story. I want to leave you with this from an Indigenous Australian scholar, Christine Black, who wrote a book, and I recommend it to you. The Land is the Source of the Law. And there's a quote in this book from a person called Johnson, an American Indigenous man who, like the Australian Aborigines, understands the power of the land in shaping the past, the present, and the future. And when I say the land, I mean the land and the sea. It's all connected. I want you to remember only one thing, said the badger. The stories people tell have a way of taking care of them. If stories come to you, care for them and learn to give them anywhere they are needed. Sometimes a person needs story more than food to stay alive. Thank you very much.